Okay, we live out there. So do you want me to go just into my present? Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
Okay.
Hi, Ed.
Hello.
You're
Hello
too
today.
fast. You're too fast. You're too fast.
That
Let me
was my
introduce
nickname in
you.
college, Fast Eddie.
Okay.
Like Fast Eddie.
Hello, and
Hello.
welcome to everybody first. So it's a
Okay.
great pleasure, great honor to jump over the ocean again.
Yeah.
You're based in exactly?
Well, I'm in Park City, Utah right now. This is a beautiful ski place, a four-season place, a place I always kind of wanted to be in. It's only an hour flight from LA. So I
Wow,
move back and forth a little bit. This is
okay.
my new wet lab behind me.
Okay, so pretty cool stuff. So I know you as a not only lab technician, a great photographer. So you're part also of our dentist camera community, and I appreciate all your input on any kind of photography related topics. But today we want to dive into something different, which is also one of your expertise. It's crazy how many things you know. It's really crazy,
I
and
know teeth.
especially on ceramics. On ceramics, you're really a hot guy,
Well,
let's
thank you.
say, with a lot of experience. And experience is what we need to talk about a little bit more in deep about zirconia. Zirconia, a really, let's say, hot topic. It entered the market relatively slowly because being like the white steel for many years, zirconia had like a bad image, especially in aesthetic dentistry. So maybe you can say it was the super Hollywood white material. So
It
the
works there,
chiclet,
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
white, really
Yeah.
bony, without any translucency, without any really nearly tooth-like structures. And there was an evolution of zirconia materials. And I think we will jump into the discussion. So the introduction was, what is 3 mole, what is 4 mole, what is 5 mole? And I want to give you the word. Maybe you can show us some slides to introduce the topic a little bit more for our audience.
Great. Well, first of all, Alessandro, thank you for having me. Okay. And I was so honored when you asked. We've seen each other, met each other at various meetings, and I thought it was great because I love photography that you asked me to speak. So I thought, wonderful, I get to talk about photography a little bit because that is a passion of mine other than teeth. And then this evolved into the zirconia discussion, which I'm really happy to do. I have a lot of good information on it and a lot of very good practical information. So an applied scientist or applied clinician sort of perspective, not just a pure scientist perspective, which obviously we need if we're clinicians. We need it to translate to what we are doing on a daily basis. So I have a lot of good information. So yes, I'll jump into that in just a second, okay? So let me make sure I've got this interface. This is a cool interface, by the way, that you have for doing a simulcast. Those of you out there, I'm not sure he mentioned, but we are on YouTube Live right now, and we're on Facebook Live. And so if you didn't tell Facebook that you wanted to interact live and ask questions, jump over to YouTube right now. Find us on YouTube. He had the link sent out there, and that way we can interact quite well together. All right, so let me do that here. I put together several images. So imagery, obviously, the old saying, an image picture's worth 1,000 words. But maybe 10,000 words, especially in the zirconia. So let me give a little teeny tiny intro here. Answer that first question, the 3Y, 4Y, and 5Y. What is a mole and what makes all of those things different, beneficial, and some of the negatives? All right, so let me just jump into the presentation here. This is sort of an excerpt from a contemporary aesthetic lecture I do where I talk about contemporary ceramics in this lecture, okay? All right, many of you know, just a quick intro, I spent 22 years at UCLA running the Advanced Aesthetic Dentistry department and a master's ceramic lab. Got a little bit bored there, and unfortunately a bad fire actually took the lab space. So these things happen in life. And I spent a couple years recently at the University of Alabama helping them start their program, their sort of master's aesthetic / restorative / materials program, and I had a good time there. Many of you ask, unfortunately I had to leave. I had a very bad accident and it required 14 surgeries. So I just wanted to get back closer to home, closer to my physicians. So I'm good now. I'm pretty good now. A couple little aches and pains, but I'm fine. So this is where I'm at today. I'm still working with a couple of universities part-time and adjunct professor types, okay? And this is where we're sitting right here. Actually, it's the room right over here. I took all the weight equipment out where I do little small courses, which I'm having fun with these days. And so my website is AOA, Art Oral America, DTG, I partner with if you're interested in courses. Now, Alessandro, I do have one hobby other than teeth. Teeth is probably my only thing that I really know very well. I love making movies, and being in Hollywood for a number of years, I had some patients that were quite prominent in the filmmaking business, independent types. So I started making movies, and I've made 9, and I'm working on the newest one right now. So he asked me to show you the trailer. So enjoy the trailer for a couple of seconds. It's a James Bond-ish movie.
So I don't know if we hear the sound, so I'm not sure.
I have it on. I'm hearing the sound.
Oh, okay, then it's good. So I think people are hearing it, so that's great.
Okay, a little bit of fun to get started here.
Yeah, I love the statement "ceramists are forever," because this is also a topic that we could talk about for hours with the introduction of digital dentistry. If we need people like you anymore.
Well, there's a good point to that. In fact, I'd love to come back and talk about that. I mean, most people today will tell you that are using monolithic, and myself on posterior teeth, they're still doing micro layering of anterior teeth for the highest end aesthetics, whether it be a porcelain veneer or whether it be layering zirconia. So I think we're going to be doing that for a few years. Okay, so I'm going to do a little fun storyline behind that with a specter trying to eliminate all the ceramists on Earth. So we'll have a little fun with that, and hopefully that'll be out in the next summer, by the way. So not to waste too much time, I know we wanted to have this interactive. Just quickly, I'm working on a book, and this ties into just what you were saying. Do we need the ceramists? All of us see what comes out of a machine today, and they're getting pretty good what's coming out of a machine, but it's still not finished. And so we're going to need somebody, an enamelizer, a finisher, all kinds of names we can come up with. But I decided to put together a book on all the different materials we use: zirconia, glass ceramics, composites, how to finish, how to surface texture, how to finish, how to optimize surfaces. And we're going to talk a little bit about surface in zirconia in just a little bit, because you know what comes out of the machine doesn't look like this. That's monolithic zirconia down here, ladies and gentlemen. This is monolithic, this is composite over here, okay? So it just, you know, with the machine composite, machine ceramics, I love it. It saves me a lot of time, but I still need that, you know, 5 or 10% energy on the end to make it a super nice result. And we can get a 3-dimensional look to our ceramics with monolithics with proper materials, obviously, the ones that have the right translucency. I just did something for Guide. So if people want to know everything that's in my brain, I put together a 25-session thing for Guide, and it's on sale until the next week for $399. So it's 60 hours of information, 60 hours of CE, you get CE credits. And several people are helping me on this. Didier Dietschy's teaching composites. Francisco Matroni, I always get his name wrong, full mouth reconstruction on implants, and a couple of young studs that were my former students. Johan Figueira, many of you know. This is Johan. He's doing some stuff on digital. And Remember this guy's face, everybody. This is the most talented, gifted person I ever trained. He has Jesus's hands. He has God's hands. A little bit of a quiet introvert, but just amazing. And you'll have him someday on your photography or workshops. All right, but let's.
What's his name?
Oh, I am so sorry. Diego Augusta Michel. Diego Augusta. Yeah, I know. Nice long name. And I like short names, like Ed. Ed, you know? One syllable. And that's all my brain can deal with anymore is one syllable. So yeah, watch for that guy. He's going to be the next superstar. Let me give you a quick resume. Prosthodontist, professor, master ceramist now. Okay, so he's got all of the training and the titles, and more than that, he's got the ability, and he's a super nice guy, great teacher. All right, so let's answer this question. What's a mole anyway? We're going to do that in just a second. And if we have a few minutes on the end, since we are a photographic group here, I'd like to share a couple of simple things on photography, because all of us love to look at pictures like this, and we all take courses from fabulous photographers, both in and outside of dentistry, that teach us how to use all this cool stuff. How many of you actually buy it, though? About 1% of us. That's the number. About 1% of us end up setting up full studios. I know Alessandro has one. I have one, but that's not dentistry, okay? That is our passion. That is our hobby. That is our professional release, I guess, so to speak. And you have to have space for it. Just quickly, and then I'm going to answer those questions. I do want to give you a personal bias. My personal bias, if I never, ever do anything but a porcelain veneer, the rest of my life, I'm a happy camper. I love working with paper-thin ceramics. That's the preps on her, as minimal as I could get to be able to. I don't like undercuts. I've gone through that phase 2 or 3 times of no prep, and I will do a no prep case if a patient forces me to, but I usually end up having problems. The margins aren't quite as good, a little bit of undercuts. So, you know, we usually can do micro prep, and I think this is a more conservative anyway. Why? Because that's going to last twice as long. With well-fit, good finish margins, we're not having leakage issues. We remove the aprismatic enamel, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that was sort of the finished case. So let's come to the answer to this question. Give me about 5 minutes. I'll answer this question, and then we'll start the interactivity of what was planned today. So we've all heard these terms, translucent zirconia. Now it started just like our bonding agents, right? Just a few years ago. First generation, second generation, third generation, like bonding agents, fourth generation. What does all that mean, okay? And then you started to hear terms 3-mole yttria, 5-mole yttria, 4-mole yttria. And then it changed to 3Y, 4Y, and 5Y. Simpler. I like that better because it's shorter, one syllable. All right? And now we seem to have everything else in between, right? But what does that mean to us? Okay, so let me give you a couple of slides with that. What's a mole anyway? Little furry creature that comes out of the ground and looks at its shadow, you know, to see if we're going to have any extra winter, okay? And is there a magic number, by the way? Is there the right amount? I don't know about you, but I'm getting a little frustrated that I got to have 47,000 different materials in a drawer. Now, if I absolutely have to have it, great. I'll have it in the drawer, okay? But if I can combine a few things and still maintain high quality, that's what I want to do. All right, so let me tell you, just preface this. Everything I tell you, I've actually personally tested. I have an Instron machine, and I have a 27,000 spectrophotometer right here. It's over here, okay, so that I test stuff that I know what I'm talking about, at least on the physical and optical parameters that we've been testing. All right, so here, let's try and answer that question. Okay, so the first generation, as it was called, was 3Y, or 3% yttria, okay? Of the molecules, okay? So that's in the simplest definition of what a mole is. So 1% or 1Y or 3Y of something would mean 3% of the molecules are yttria. So 1Y zirconia would be 1% of the molecules. So simply stated, a mole is a number of molecules. All right, now it relates to carbon, and there's a very complex definition I could give you, but I don't want to do that. I don't want to lose you. So when you hear 3Y zirconia, it means 3% of the molecules are yttria. 97% of the molecules are zirconia. When you hear 4Y, it's 4% of the molecules are yttria, and 96%, 5Y, 5, and 95. So 95% would be zirconia, 5% would be. So that's the oversimplistic, but relatively descriptive and accurate and useful thing. All right. So here's a little bit of a breakout because people started asking me this. They said, well, Ed, I saw on the MSDS on the zirconia puck or blank or whatever we want to call it, it said 8.8%. But you said it was 5, this 5Y. Manufacturers are required, in the United States anyway, to put the percentage of weight, not the percentage of molecules. Okay, so if one molecule zirconia weighs less than yttria, then you're going to have a much higher percentage of weight in the material. Okay, so what does that mean? 5Y, you're going to see on the packaging, it's about 8.8% weight yttria. Okay, 4Y, this new in-between material between the 3 and the 5, 7, 7.1, 7.2 yttria, and the rest is zirconia. Okay, all right, so what does that translate? What does that now mean? So that now you kind of got an idea what a mole is, but great. Okay, so that didn't tell me anything useful, other than now I know there's 3% of the molecules in 3Y material. I now know that, but what does that mean to me as a clinician? Okay, so the original 3Y materials had a little bit extra alumina in it, and we'll talk about alumina in a second. I'm gonna leave that off the table now so I don't confuse you, okay? It has mostly, the 3Y materials are over 90% is the tetragonal phase crystal. What we know about the tetragonal crystals are the early materials like lava. They're as opaque as hell. They're strong. They're 1,1400 megapascals, and those are the materials we've been using for layering. And probably if you're going to layer a big bridge, that should be something that you consider. You're going to put a little bit of porcelain on, and that's, like Alessandro said when we opened up, it's a little bit like white steel. So it's replacing our metal and our metal ceramics, and that's a good place to be. So this is where you should be thinking about if you're going to layer traditionally. All right, let's jump over to the 5Y because you've been hearing a lot about these 5Y materials. Everybody and their brother is making 5Y materials. I'll be making one on Monday, and Alessandro will be making one on Tuesday, and Panos Bezos will be making one on Wednesday because there's some damn good profit in these materials and they look pretty good. Okay, so when you increase, so here's functionally what's happening. When you increase the yttria content, okay, and it's a special word, dopant. Maybe somebody was on drugs one day. I don't know. Okay, when you increase the yttria content to a certain percentage, it changes the phase of zirconia. And zirconia exists in 3 different crystal shapes: tetragonal, cubic, the fake diamond, the translucent stuff, and then this monoclinic crystal, which we'll talk about. So 3 different phases, 3 different types of zirconia. Think of it that way. All right, so when you increase to 5Y or 5% of the molecules yttria, you shift the phase from mostly tetragonal to 50% cubic phase. We get super translucent stuff. I'm going to back up for a second here. We do give away something though. We lose quite a bit of strength. We go down to 750, but that's pretty strong. All right. The second generation material, maybe I will touch on this since I had on the slide. It was, they just took alumina out of the original material, dropped the strength a little bit. That was Bruxer and lava, and we'll get to that paper in a little bit, and we'll talk about that at that point. Okay, so then more recently, companies have come out with, hey, let's go somewhere in between. This is too damn opaque. This maybe isn't strong enough for bridges at 750, getting close, okay? The ADA says 800 megapascals for bridge strength. If we put a little less yttria in there, what happens? So 4% of the molecules, well, we decrease the amount of cubic phase. We're still around 25, 30%, but we actually don't lose much translucency. And here's the good news. Those materials test out around 1,000, 1,100 megapascals. So I don't know what generation it is. It's a 4th generation, 6th, 9th, whatever, okay? But that's essentially what's happening. So just a quick summary of what I just said. The 3Y material is the original high strength, virtually 100% tetragonal. The 5Y material came out right after that, okay? Medium strength, maybe a little on the low strength side based on zirconia, about half cubic, half tetragonal. All right, we go down to the 4Y, we decrease the yttria a little bit. Okay, we get about 75%-ish tetragonal, and 30% cubic. Let me just say one more thing, and then we'll get into the discussion. So what else does that mean to us? Okay, so one of the things that many of you remember, and the scientific types listening will remember, okay, that one of the best benefits of tetragonal zirconia, it had a unique ceramic property that if you, a new physical property, excuse me, physical chemical property, that if you applied an external energy source to it, or a few other things, but just grinding or even occlusal issues, okay, it would undergo a phase transformation from this shaped crystal. When you say phase transformation, it means something different, a different phase, to this shaped crystal. So this is called the TM transformation, okay, or transformation toughening. This crystal is about 3% bigger than this. It actually made the material stronger. When we grind on glass, it gets weaker. When we ground on this stuff, it got stronger. Okay, so this 1100 megapascals went to 1300, phenomenal. All right, now when the cubic material came out at 750, everybody assumed that we'd have that same physical property, physical chemical property, that if we ground on it, it would change to this shape. Any little micro cracks would sort of pushed closed and increase in strength. So what happens basically, let me go to this slide real fast, almost done with this, that the larger particle size, back up, the larger part, this depicts larger particle size, the monoclinic crystal, it pushes close, not completely, but it creates compression on those surfaces, which makes it stronger. Okay, now I just wanted to say one last thing, and then we will jump into the discussion here. So that answered the basic question. Here's the interesting thing though. At a critical amount of cubic phase, and it hasn't been determined exactly what that is it 50%, is it 30%? The cubic form of zirconia, the 5Y material, doesn't do this phase transformation. So if you start a crack in this, it's there. And in fact, sandblasting weakens it. We can talk about that just a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna make just a general recommendation to you here. To me, of all the materials I've looked at, and I've looked at a lot, the 4Y materials seem to be the perfect. If you have one material in a drawer, and I'll recommend 3, maybe later, 3 or 4. I never give one material because I don't work for anybody. I've never taken a dime for the research. That's why I'm poor, Alessandro, and don't have a car. Whenever I make money, I buy machines, okay? And so I funded all of my own research. I never took a dime from a company for a study, okay? Because I didn't want to, well, you know, the reasons why, basically. Okay, so the 4Y materials actually still undergo a phase transformation. So we still have good translucency with the 4Y, good strength, and if you have a little crack in it, it won't weaken it. Maybe let me show you one slide that what I mean by that really quickly here, and then we'll have a discussion. Okay. So this is a very important thing to know right here. Okay. I'm going to bring up a couple of circles here. Okay. These are 5Y materials, 5% yttrium. Okay. Noritake, lava, argon, all great strength. Fine. When you sandblast them, aluminous oxide them, and we were the first one to prove this, myself, Shane White at UCLA in 2015, 2016, because Shane's a genius. This guy's my scientist on my team. I have people that I work with and stuff like that. I kind of visualize what should we do for a study, and I have a lot of help with people that, you know, do the science for me. I mean, I do the study, but they do the science, and which is the way to collaborate, right? Okay, so anyway, we go down to under 500 megapascals in flexural strength if you sandblast a 5Y material. That's still pretty strong. It's fine for a crown. That is not fine for a bridge. All right, let's jump over here. Let me just give you one real quick 4Y material, and I'll show you later on. We can get into this. So the first 4Y material we tested was Ivoclar's Emax Zircad MT. I don't know why we call everything Emax, okay, but that's confusing. So there's Zircad MT. It's a 4Y material. We got 917 megapascals. They say 1,050. You know how it goes. It could be the day of the test, right? And if we sandblasted it, the strength went up just a little bit. So that's indicative of potential phase transformation. So where my summary right now, and then I'll back out right after this slide, is if I'm going to do a bridge, I'm using this material or 3Y. If I'm doing monolithic, I'm using a 4Y material. And we can talk about firing in a little bit. If I'm doing single crowns in the anterior part of the mouth, I'm going to do this. because we're going to sandblast the inside sometimes, right? Okay, and it does weaken it a little bit. That may not be a clinical problem. We don't know yet. But this is too weak for a bridge. This is too weak. This is dangerous, especially if you have a small connector, okay? This is fine for a bridge. In fact, we can micro-layer that. Okay, so that'd be a good point to back out right there. And let's start the discussion.
This was a great introduction, but let me just jump into this very interesting thing, and we need to address a thing that is the consequence of creating more translucent zirconia is also the introduction of multi-layered zirconia. Can you give us some thoughts on this?
Are you talking about the gradient of strength, multi-layer?
No. This is on the gradient on color. Yeah. So basically, there are different brands out there, from Kurarai, from Vita, from Ivoclar. So everybody is now doing multi-layered zirconia materials. I'm working with that in my office.
Okay, so I can tell you, I've got all kinds of specimens here. I got a mob books full of specimens that I tested and that we broke and disc taped and stuff. So for the multi-layered, multicolor material that has the same yttria or the same composition, phase composition all the way through. So it's not like 3Y, then 4Y and 5Y. There was virtually no difference in strength between the layers, okay? And no difference in how they behave. So the addition of color and creating the gradient just did not create a problem. Now, speaking to your paper that you had us all read, where we talk about fast sintering cycles, we don't know for sure, okay, on these super fast cycles, what is actually hitting, is happening. We do know the grain structure is different. We do know the translucency can be different. Interestingly, the strength isn't that much different. Okay, between fast sintering and slow sintering, but the translucency can be different, and definitely the grain structure can be different. And so whenever you play around with grain structure, obviously the studies weren't done on that different grain structure. And that was an interesting paper that you gave us to read, talked about that on the speed sintering, there was a problem in a clinical study there was a phase transformation. It's called low temperature degradation. Okay, where the normal zirconia in the mouth, the trigonal, will go to a monoclinic form, but on the surface, that's different than when you grind on it or sandblast it, okay? It's sort of a water breakdown of the surface, and the surface is definitely weaker. Now, to reference that paper for a second, one of the things you need to understand about the failure of ceramics, ceramics don't fail, especially high-strength ceramics, they don't fail from the top down. So I'm not worried about a little bit of breakdown on the surface of a monoclinic restoration, okay, from the point of view of strength. Because on that paper, the zone of transformation was 2, 3, 4 microns, depending on what material. So if the failure doesn't come from the top inside, the failure comes from the inside out if it's going to fail. So for me, the thing what I would have worried most about that paper was the roughness that developed because of the low temperature degradation, and that roughness that developed causing increased abrasion of natural teeth. So that's what I took from that paper. Okay, and yeah, we need to test that more. All this stuff is changing by the day. The only thing that I would say about that paper is they're talking about a couple of things that I would define a little differently, to say nicely, is they said high translucent, low alumina material. Now, I tested the Bruxer material, which is the same composition. They didn't say what material it was. I also tested the Lava Plus, which is a low alumina 3Y material. They are not very translucent.
No, but the question then is, if I'm listening to you, if I'm reading the literature, if I'm listening to the companies promoting zirconia materials, they are constantly going to new generation, new things. And the problem is, if I put the crown in the mouth of my patient, I don't want to change it after 3 years because a new material is coming out and they tell me the old one you have put in will break down in 2 years. So So I see, or what would be your recommendation? So you gave already one that you told us, if you want to be safe, stay with the 4Y zirconia materials. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would use the 4Y materials. That would be my universal material unless I needed that exceptional translucency. I was doing 1 or 2 front teeth or something like that. Then I would use a 5Y material. Now, here was the interesting thing. Let me go back to this for just a second, okay?
Yeah.
That if we sandblast, so this was sandblasted, and then if we sandblasted and resin coated the surface, that this simulated bonding, and then we fractured them. So if I was going to use a 4Y material or 5Y material, I'm going to bond it. I'm going to do adhesive dentistry because the strength went back up to 600 megapascals. Let me give you another little reference here for just a second. So when we typically test things, companies, they're going to want the highest number possible, correct? That hopefully done ethically. So usually when you see people say 700 megapascals, 800 megapascals, they've done it on a perfectly polished sample, so smooth you can ice skate on it. That's going to give you the highest numbers. So here's what we did. I said, well, great, that's nice to know. This is theoretical strength. I want to know the practical strength, the applied clinical strength. And what's that design going to look like? Okay, you're not going to polish the inside of your crowns, are you? I don't. First of all, you don't have the instrument shapes to do that. I'm going to use as machined. What comes out of the machine? Maybe sandblasted, maybe not. So we tested as machined. So we made some discs, as machined, fractured them, as machined, fractured them, as machined, fractured them. Biaxial flexural. Okay, so what that tells me is, and I did 6 or 7 other materials, all right around 600 megapascals, plus or minus, the applied strength, the actual strength of the material is around 600 megapascals, as we use it anyway. And if we sandblast it, it goes down to under 500. So again, I'll revert back to this, sorry to be redundant, is if I want to bond it, which I do, the 5Y materials, I sandblast, but then I use a resin liner, obviously a resin cement, with an MDP primer, and the strength went back up. This was with a 60 micron layer of resin plus the 1.2 millimeter disc. But if I don't want to worry about any about that, people say, well, Jesus, Ed, I mean, I wanted to use this stuff because I wanted to use it like metal ceramic. I didn't want to go through all that stuff. I just want to use zinc phosphate, which you could use, I guess. Glass ionomer would be the recommendation, or resin reinforced glass ionomer. Then I would go with the 4Y material because it looks pretty good. So that would be my general recommendation.
So there was a question about surface treatment. So a colleague telling that we are just polishing the functional parts.
Okay, so exactly, that's what I've been doing for years. Okay, so if you've listening to Rella Christensen, she did some of the pioneering work basically showing that glazed zirconia was quite abrasive. But so here's an interesting thing about glaze, because the typical glazed particles are 3 to 15 to 20 microns, which is like rough sandpaper, even though it looks nice and shiny. So that's really what's causing the abrasion. It's the larger particles of the rough glass microscopically, all right? And I understand what your previous person basically just said based on some paper that she buzzed it by or he buzzed it by, is that to polish the glazed surface. There we go. Okay, thank you. Okay, so you pronounce that for me. Too many syllables. I'm going to take stay. We're going to call her Stay, or him or her Stay. Okay, but so functionally what I've done, applied clinician aspects of what I've done, I glaze I glaze and paint the aesthetic surfaces. And I actually would glaze the functional surfaces, but then I polish off the glaze. I polish because some SEMs that we did, we showed sometimes there's some teeny tiny micropores, and basically I want any little microscopic pieces of glass to fill into those pores, okay? So moisture doesn't get in, and then I just polish back down to the zirconia. And actually John Burgess did a study. He did a study where he looked at glazed, polish, and polished zirconia. And he found that the abrasiveness of the glazed polished was the same as the polished. But I think it's a better surface because I'm sealing any micropores. So that, yes, I agree with that paper, what they mentioned.
So one question from Richie. water degradation with different zirconia. So what are your thoughts on this? So we know, because in the early days there was like the statement that rotors of helicopters would just explode over time if water gets inside the zirconia material. So then everybody was afraid that the patients have like time bombs in their mouth. So one day they will like go and have micro or large explosions in their mouths, cracking up their restorations.
Well,
what do you think about this?
okay, well, the helicopter thing I heard about, but that all came from essentially the hip implants, right? Okay,
Yeah.
so hip implants were done with and without alumina as a dopant, and the ones without alumina in them are definitely more susceptible to low temperature degradation. Okay, the monoclinic form on the surface change. What that does is sometimes that creates compression that you don't necessarily want, a breakdown of interfaces of grains, which makes the material weak. And so there was actually reports in the medical literature where hip implants done without the alumina material blew up. I mean, just basically disintegrated in people's hips because of the reaction of water. All right, so let's fast forward to dentistry. So when the FDA, and I don't know about the governing bodies in Europe, but the FDA made the companies put in alumina, somewhere between 1/4 to 0.5% of alumina. If you add that, you don't get hardly any low temperature degradation, at least with normal firing, at least now we know with normal firing. All right, so now here's the interesting thing. Now remember, is if we seal a surface of a crown to the tooth, we're not having a problem on the inside unless there's leakage. So if you do a fast sintering, so maybe one of the things to take from that paper, if you're doing a fast sintering with a 3Y or maybe even a 4Y paper, I would bond that probably to the tooth, even though you don't think you need to do it. I'd put an MDP primer on the inside and some resin cement so that I'm protecting that surface from moisture. Because if we go back to my salient point about fracture, the fracture starts from the inside of the crown and works to the surface. That's well documented. Bob Kelly did a lot of work, and Matthias Kern did work on that over the fracture patterns of zirconia and alumina, by the way. So let's protect that surface for sure if we're going to do fast sintering. Now, remember the external surface, even in that study, and Nate Lawson did something like that, we only have about 3 or 4 microns of this transformation layer. For a crown, I don't think that's a problem with fracture. I absolutely don't believe that'll be a problem with fracture. But I think it's a problem with roughness, to repeat what I said earlier. So Richard, to answer your question specifically, for a crown, I wouldn't worry about it too much. For a bridge, I would. So I probably, from the information that we see right now, I don't think I would be fast sintering a bridge. Because if we've created an environment where potentially this low temperature degradation can take place, it could probably happen in connector areas and fractures, right? So I would do normal sintering for a bridge for sure. Now remember the point I made before, the 5Y materials don't have low temperature degradation because they have too much cubic phase in there. When you get more than about 30% cubic phase, you lose the ability, or you don't have this phase transformation. So there's a good and bad of a 5Y material. The 5Y material doesn't undergo low temperature degradation, but if you sandblast it, it weakens it, okay?
Oh, that's great. So, but coming back, we need to talk about this speed sintering. So I made a remark. So I'm a CEREC user. I bought this Speedfire furnace and working, and the companies Kurai and all these companies are telling us, or the program is, you have the fast sintering, and for single crowns we even go down to 18 minutes.
Yeah, I don't think
single crown. But well, no, I want to continue because it was interesting, your slide showing the sear cut material. If I use the sear cut material, the Ivoclar material, the same multi-layer block, the speed sinter time is 43 minutes.
Yeah, it needs to be longer.
You can not go below that. And you see, and then I tested also in my office. If you put the Ivoclar crown in the fast sinter program, it looks awful.
Yes, I would agree. Let me show you that slide.
You have a slide?
I have that slide. Okay. So great. I figured we'd be talking about this, so I grabbed a few. Okay, so the exact same thing. So Jed Archibald, a good friend of mine, who's taught me a lot about prime. I have a little different firing cycle than his because I try to shorten it a little bit, 7 hours versus 8.5 hours. So at 7.5 hours firing cycle, it didn't affect the translucency at all, just to show you this. But you are right. When you get under 45 minutes, so this was total in and out of the oven, but only 30 minutes at temperature, you can see, I mean, basically it's an opaque piece of dung, really, okay? And there's an interesting point, you know, that most of these companies buy their zirconia from a company called Toso in Japan, which makes zirconia. Their material seems to be a little bit more susceptible to speed firing. In other words, you don't get as good a translucency if you speed fire. Noritake, in fact, let me show you Noritake's material here. Noritake, they make their own zirconia. And I always love these companies when you ask them, well, can you tell me a little bit about it? And they always use that some version of the Tom Cruise joke. Yes, I'll tell you, but I have to kill you. So you never find anything out about it, okay? All right, but I did all the speed firing with a couple of my graduate students specifically, and Vida Maharishi, who helped me with all this stuff. And then Shane White and Nate Lawson we worked with when I was and John Burgess at UAB to help us with some of the science, okay? So the Noritake material was actually the only material that what I call this a sonic sire or something like that, whatever you want to call it, okay? So where we were only at temperature for about 25 minutes. So we were at high temperature for about 25 minutes. It still held its chroma and good translucency. All right, so the other materials, just to show you, no. What we found with most materials, you could shorten the firing cycle to 120 minutes, in and out, from the time you put it in the oven, but the time you can start working on it, okay? You need to think about heat up, cool down, and all that stuff, okay? Sonic cycle is what I call it. And most of the Toso materials, you couldn't go below that. You start to lose chroma, you start to lose translucency. So let me just give you a general, we looked at a lot, okay? So we've done 10 different materials. Same thing, Emax, just what I showed you from a crown form. Okay, just different shapes. We tried every different imaginable thing. So let me get to the cycle that I wanted to show you. Where was that? It's here. So, because I get asked this all the time, do you have a cycle that you can say just pretty much works for most materials that's speed firing? This is it right here. So please take a picture of the screen. We tested at least 10 5Y materials, and I tested 3 4Y materials. And if you're at 45 minutes, 1600 degrees, so you need to be a little hotter, okay? 45 minutes, not 30, not 18, not 24 for those materials, all right? You're in and out of the oven from the time you push the start button and the time you can touch it. Okay, so that's what this number is here, the time you can actually touch it. It's about 2 hours. And yes, there are a couple of materials, like that is a benefit of the Noritake material. You could probably cut that down to maybe 80 minutes, okay, 75 minutes, and still have all the physical properties. And we tested everything. We tested this, and all this stuff is going, it has been in the IEDR, and I know I haven't published a lot of it, my bad.
So one remark, when I compared the blocks from Vita, Kurai Noritake, and Ivoclar, it really is visible that the Ivoclar materials look like having brown spots in the block. So yeah. The other ones are really white. So it's white powder pressed to a block form, and the Ivoclar material, if you look closer, you see all small brownish dots. So it looks like a cake or something else. So it must be a different composition of material. What can you tell me about that? So that's maybe the question. What is the difference between Ivoclar, Kurarai, and Vita and other materials in the composition? What do you know? And maybe this has an impact on the speed sinter time that is much higher with Ivoclar than with other materials.
Well, they all have, okay, so the big difference among, okay, most of them use Tosu and some of them make their own, okay, and they're not, for instance, Zircon Zan uses Tosu, Argan uses Tosu, Vita, I'm not sure. I know they're trying to manufacture their own. I can't give you. And I know Ivoclar does some of the stuff themselves and partner with people. The big difference is how they colorize it. So, and then this is a proprietary way that they get each of these materials through these multicolor materials, how they get the color in the material. And the color has to react and flow essentially through grain boundaries and react with the grain to give us the optics that we see, right? And that may be the uniqueness of the Noritake material, that they've solved a way to do that. And I ask these questions, honestly, Alessandro, and they say, well, it's our unique process of putting color into the material. And so that we can do that, so that they're not all that forthright. Yeah, they'll tell you the percentage of yttria. They'll tell you the percentage of this. They'll tell you the average grain size, which I'm sure they probably have to do for FDA or international standards. So the big difference is how they colorize it. And then the colorization affects, if you don't fire it correctly, to turn it opaque or to turn it blotchy or something like that. So basically you have to test each material with the fire and see if it gives you the optics you want. So you start with, maybe a medium sinter at 2 hours, and then you start shortening it to an hour and a half, and you start shortening it to an hour and 15 minutes, and then you're going to find a point where the optics of it change drastically. Now, there's an interesting, good point, and you made this, I think, at the outset of the lecture. Most studies, and our study showed the same thing, and I only went down to 75 minutes from the time you push the start button till you could touch it, okay? So that's, people aren't really honest about that, is that it didn't affect the strength. I mean, the strength went down 10%, so we do lose some strength with speed sintering. And then there is a concern about low temperature degradation. So as a general rule, what I would say to anybody out there using this, I realize we got to make a living, we got to get our patient in and out. If it's a first or second molar, I'd probably, and it's a single crown, I'd probably speed sinter, okay, if I'm doing chair side. Honestly, today I'd probably use the Noritake material chair side. That looks the best, okay, and I get nothing from any of these companies. And you know, being a scientist yourself, isn't it interesting? A funded study by Noritake, or anybody, not pick on Noritake, but by a company paid to a university, somehow gets the best results. How is that? Why is that? Okay,
we call that biased. We call that biased.
Yeah, I know. Okay, but and I don't think that people are intentionally trying to be dishonest, but let's face it. Okay, so and that's why I do it myself, and that's why I'm poor. Okay, so
this is an interesting question that in all lectures I assisted or I was talking about zirconia, somebody's asking, what about etching zirconia?
Okay, so you can't conventionally etch zirconia, okay? There's a company called Zircos in Korea. I'll be happy to give it to you. They came out with an etch. It apparently won't etch a 3Y material, but it does etch a 5Y material. And it has 5 or 6 acids mixed in. Every acid you could possibly name is in the cocktail. Okay, and here's the problem with it, though, is you have to have a ventilation hood just like you do in a scientific lab. It's about a 30-minute process. Obviously, you wax out the areas that you don't want, and it'll etch it quite well. Okay, now there's several people out there that have showed, starting with Matthias Kern, now more recently Marcus Blatz, John Burgess, and us too, that just sandblasting the zirconia, okay, and using an MDP primer, you're going to get pretty good bond strength, okay? It's not the same as an etched glass. We don't get a great micromechanical retention, but we do get chemical and we get some micromechanical. But specifically to your question, Zircos, something or other, I will get you the link, okay, after the lecture, okay? I'll get you the link.
But basically the sandblasting procedure is something that is also proven or let's say supported by the literature. The bonding protocol you mentioned, Marcus Blatz and Weilat and many different people from universities can support the bonding protocol of zirconia.
Right.
You sandblast the interior, and then using MDP containing bonding materials or silanes, or today now we have bonding materials which have MDP inside. So the latest generation of Panavia is also very interesting. So wow. I realized that Japanese companies are very good in bonding.
Good. So we're bringing up a real interesting, that's a hot topic in itself. So let me just make a couple recommendations based on what you said. one of the basic tenets of bonding, and I know you're heavy into all kinds of research, not just photography, which obviously everybody knows, but done bonding research associated with universities. One of the basic tenets, number one tenet of bonding is wetting. If it doesn't wet, it doesn't bond. I don't care what your bond strength is if it doesn't effectively contact the surface. So for those of you that are using pure Panavia, I'm fine with it. It's got all its stuff in it, but the wetting phenomena isn't as good because of the viscosity. So I'm fine with that for a crown. If you're going to do a non-retentive preparation and you are totally relying on adhesion, I would apply a separate bonding agent or primer to the restoration and a low viscosity resin, then your cement. So then you're absolutely sure, just like a porcelain veneer, that you've wetted the surface effectively. So there's no microscopic gaps in the surface. Now I would add one thing to the etching though. Now this is evolving now to where we're starting to do, or not starting, it's in the process for a while, people doing completely non-retentive preps with 5Y. And that does worry me a little bit with just a pure MDP primer and sandblasting, because I can pull up pieces of literature that shows you that you'll have some debonds at 8 or 10 years using MDP, specifically with alumina. You know, you're not going to have a debond of etched porcelain if you treat it correctly, right? Okay, so I do like the idea, as we're evolving and moving into non-retentive, almost no press, minimal prep for the zirconia, I do like the idea of being able to etch the 5Y surface so that we get a little bit better micromechanical bond, especially for the long term.
Oh, that's super cool. So to sum it up, I think people are getting tired. I don't know.
Yeah.
I could continue for a long time, but let's sum it up. So basically, 3Y, 4Y, 5Y. Now
let me make it as simple as possible.
I think it's clear. It's clear to everybody who was listening to your statements what this is all about. You prefer the 4Y materials, and you showed why, because of the strength of
these are the let me recommend 3. Okay, yeah, and I know that there are more. Okay, Vita has a nice one too. I'd recommend Vita. I just got done testing it, but I did not get it in the lecture. So Argon Z HT plus, Zircad MT from Ivaclar, and the Vericor from Whipmix. And I'd recommend Vita's material now too. So that'll give you 4 materials that maintain high strength, even if you sandblast them, have good aesthetics. You can micro layer, okay, if you want to. Just to show you a case, here's a 4Y case, micro-layered. So for my 4Y, don't want to talk about why I chose that button, but I had a problem. I had to make something custom, okay? But a 4Y micro-layered. So if I'm going to use a bridge, I use 4Y. If I'm going to use a single unit on the anterior, I'll use a 5Y. And there's several good ones out there. Noritaki's, Argons, Vita has a new one that's a 5Y. You know, everybody and their brother seems to have a 5Y, okay? So that's how I'd summarize it.
Okay, so there's a question about the material, the Zircos. I don't know the Zircos procedure. Maybe yeah. I'm sure you know.
Yeah. Okay. It is an awkward procedure. I think we're talking about the etch. Okay. So you have it's a very specialized etch. You got to wear gloves and a mask and a vent, just like it's if you remember the movie The Blob with Steve McQueen. You know, if you put your hand in the blob, it dissolved. Okay. If you put your hand in this Zircos etch, it will dissolve. Okay. It's that caustic. So you have to have, this is not a chairside thing. It's a lab where you have that typical venting. I know you have a lab where you have the suction out to the side of the building. You put the hazmat gear on, that the same thing we're wearing for COVID, right?
Yeah.
And yes, it's a process. It's about an hour process.
Yeah, but basically not necessary. So there, I think it's.
I would argue if the practitioners out there that are going to move into absolute minimalistic prep, pure adhesion, I would potentially consider something like that. Okay. For the 5Y materials, if you cut a little retention groove, a parallel wall or two, no, I wouldn't see it as a necessary.
So another one from New York, Panavia V5 wets Panavia SA is different, no separate wetting, but you can add bonding agent to increase strength.
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. I would just add, you know, an MDP primer just to wet the surface. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
A low viscosity primer. Same basic stuff that's in the cement. It's just a little lower viscosity.
So some comments from Sven Holtorf. Sounds
well,
German.
There you go, Sven. Sven, you'll have to send me exactly how you do it. Okay. So yeah. And by the way, so here's a lab that's doing it. Those of you out there that are dentists.
No, he was the guy that commented on the Circos procedure.
Yeah. See. Okay. Great. Do you see? He's already showing studies of increased adhesion. And the study, UCLA did some studies, and they didn't show a gigantic increase in adhesion initially. But, you know, these materials in the mouth, right, they're susceptible to moisture. MDP primer can break down a little bit with there's excessive moisture. So I agree with Sven. If I was doing a more purely adhesive, I would potentially look into that since it's available for us today. If you have a macromechanical retention in your preparations, right, you know, your retention and resistance form a little bit, you don't need it.
Okay, so that's super cool. So if no more questions are dropping in, so I know that many people. Sven is giving. We'll do it with photos from our lab and our technician in full mask. So yeah, that's COVID style. That's COVID style. It's not Gangnam style. You know, the Gangnam style from Korea, but this is something different. This is something different. Yeah, and this is also Jose Poliva. Jose Poliva is the guy with the zirconia implants.
Oh, yes, I've heard. Yeah.
This is a different topic. We are not talking about zirconia implant. We had a discussion with Eric van Doren about zirconia implants. But basically, to sum it up. Maybe you show this slide again because I interrupted you with the three materials that you
no
think
problem.
Could recommend.
So based on the testing, okay, that the flexural strength didn't go down with sandblasting. I also fast sintered these, the 2-hour fast sintering cycle. So I'll give you 4: Argon Z HT plus, Zircad MT from Ivoclar, Vericor is whip mix, and then Vita's 4Y material basically behave the same way. And I'm sure there are others, okay, but those are the 4s that I tested.
Okay.
And if I have 2 seconds, see, this is all monolithic. So we can get a nice result with this. Monolithic, single central out of 2 different materials.
So Rich is stating, I think Dr. Yu Zhang is a researcher, I guess.
Okay, so great. So take a look at that. If you can infiltrate porcelain into the surface and it truly sticks to the surface of the zirconia, then you can etch the porcelain and bond to the porcelain. So yes, that's something to look at. One of the things I'd be concerned about, though, would be did that create some film thickness that potentially affected seating, right? If we're putting something on the inside of the restoration that takes volume and takes space, which the porcelain would probably, I would think, need to be roughly 100 microns or more thick, so that when you effectively etched it, there was something to grab a hold of.
Yeah, but you see, there are a lot of ideas, a lot of strategies to find a way around some issues we still encounter when using zirconia in an everyday base. So, but a final thing, where do you see where do you see the position of zirconia in the whole armamentarium of ceramic materials we have? So I'm still a big fan of feldspathic ceramic on natural teeth. So that's because I'm doing this for 30 years with ceramic with Vita Mark II blocks. So feldspathic ceramic, it's long lasting. We have these hybrid materials. They also perform well. But I think you need to know, and this was a very good insight from you about zirconia. I think you need to know the properties of the material, and then you can decide where the indication is, where to place or use a certain material. And it's not about saying, okay, now we have zirconia, we use everywhere zirconia,
Right.
or we just use feldspathic, or feldspathic, this is from the old days. We don't have to use that anymore. I think the answer is not that simple, and I'm still a big fan, and I know you are, of feldspathic. So
yeah, well, like I said at the outset, so to answer your question specifically, which I think was, where do I think this fit in, or where should it fit in? For me, I mean, if you let's back out to outer space for just a second. If we have a new material or new anything, it should solve a problem that we have that we can't solve with something else in a good or better way. All right, so what was the problem that we were having really before zirconia came out? We didn't have aesthetic bridges. That was the problem. Or we wanted to conventionally cement a reasonably aesthetic ceramic, all right, in a crown situation. So for me, that's where zirconia fits in. It fits in for bridges. It fits in for maybe posterior cases where I can't get good isolation and I want to use conventional cement. That makes sense to me. That solves a problem that I had or have. Now, this idea of doing veneers with it and inlays and onlays, when we have what you just said, phenomenal glass ceramics that have unbelievable track records, look great, easy to use. You don't have to use a layered feldspathic. You can do it as a machined or pressed. Why are we doing that? I don't understand that, okay? Now, I know the real reason. It's basically because companies are trying to sell it, and we like new stuff, right? That's the real reason, but that isn't the patient's best interest. So then some people ask, well, Ed, where would you do a zirconia veneer? Where would you do a zirconia onlay? I have one answer for that, okay? So Gertrude, I'll try and answer your question in a second there, is I'm gonna use it in a case, let's say I was doing 3 zirconia crowns in the front of the mouth, and I had to do a veneer next to it. Okay, I'm gonna use the zirconia there, so I'm not mismatching materials. So that's where I would use it. All right, so let's then summarize. I'm gonna use feldspathic porcelain in the anterior part of the mouth, where I have 70% or more enamel still remaining on the tooth. There's so many studies that'll show you that it'll do better if you have enamel on the tooth. If you have more and more dentin, your failure rate's gonna go up, but absolutely you should follow Pascal Magnier and a few other people that are talking about make sure you seal your dentin at the preparation appointment if you're bonding to more dentin. Okay. For the posterior, for onlays, I'm going to use a high strength or a medium strength glass ceramic. It's a no-brainer. Emax, GC Lisi, Vita's new material, Suprinity, Ambria, there's a bunch out there. That's what I'm going to use. And then if I'm doing a crown in the posterior and I'm a little bit worried about moisture control, it's going to be zirconia. And a bridge is zirconia. Simple.
Yeah, I think it's sorry, nothing complicated.
Yeah. So that's my treatment material tree as I go down. Okay.
So who needs to make the decision? So this is also to sum up everything. So in the treatment workflow, where do you see, or who should make the decision on what material is put on what tooth?
Okay, well, 1,000,000% the dentist, with a strong input from the ceramist on the limitations, with a strong input, a collaborative. That's dentist's job. You are a dental engineer. Look up the definition of an engineer. It says a person that uses materials for the benefit of mankind. I didn't write it, okay? Person kind, okay? You are a dental engineer. Your job is designed to evaluate materials, evaluate stresses and forces, and control that and choose the best material for your patient. Now, yes, you're going to have some input from your lab. Absolutely. They're going to know some of the limitations and benefits of some of the new materials. But
because I tell you why I asked the question, because I see a lot of dentists not even knowing what they're putting in the patient mouth. So I had a case, my lab technician told me that the dentist asked him, a patient asked the dentist after 3 years, "Hey doctor, what is this full ceramic crown I have in my mouth?" And he did not he was not able to answer the question, so he had to ask the lab technician, what material did you use? No, I want to point out, I think it's absolutely mandatory that the dentist knows about the ceramic materials he's using in the patient mouth,
Right.
to avoid any failures, any failures that are visible from the beginning. If you delegate everything, no, if you delegate the material selection to the lab completely, I think you're doing a wrong job.
Right, because they might not have the proper material.
I was pointing in this direction, and you answered it 1,000,000% the dentist. Yes, but you as a lab technician, if you feel that the dentist is not aware what these materials are all about, and then you need to give him a hand and explain to him, look.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I would say within strong collaboration with the laboratory that knows the materials, but it's the dentist's responsibility. Let's look at a different view. So you're getting up, you just wake up from your hip implant in the OR, and you ask the physician, "Hey, could you tell me what you put in my hip?" I don't know. I need to call the manufacturer and the lab that made it. I'll find out. I'll call you tomorrow. How would any of you feel about that? Okay, you would want to get that guy hung. Okay, literally hung, right? Because that's a complete abdication of responsibility. You don't necessarily have to know how to use it, but you have to understand the parameters, the features and benefits. And this is why you go to lectures and listen to the Hughes, the Marcus Blatzes, all the people that are studying these materials and about material selection. Okay.
No, so this is like, let's say, a final comment from my side, that I think dentists should be invest more time in learning about ceramic materials, especially now over the last years that some new materials came onto the market, and you see even people lecturing, they don't know what the materials are all about, so
Right.
they put it in wrong categories. So everything is composite. So it's resin modified, it's ceramic modified. So there's a lot of confusion, an ongoing confusion on the definition. What are ceramic materials? So basically a composite with 87% silica filler inside is a glass. So it's like a glass full of water. Basically is more water than glass.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But,
well, speaking to your point, I mean, we all need to have our various mentors that we learn from. If you're placing implants, you're going to have an implant mentor that you're going to just trust, unless you are the mentor, okay, that's doing all the research and testing. So dentists really should be taking at least one course a year, update on materials from somebody they trust, and update on material indications. I mean, to me, that's obvious.
Yeah, I think that's great. And to end it up, I would really would like to have you show us 2 or 3 of your photography stuff.
Okay, cool.
Because I'm really keen, because I think the Zirconia stuff. If there are any more questions about this, we have the video in the Facebook group. We have the video on YouTube. If there are any questions, and I'm sure and I know that a lot of people will watch the video not now but later. And so if there are any questions raising up or coming into your mind when you go to bed, then feel free. We have the Facebook group of the International Journal of Aesthetic Dentistry, or we have also the dental photography community with Dentist Camera, active on social media. And photography, we take pictures of ceramic, of teeth, of natural teeth, and so we learn with using photography. It's also interesting how different materials react to light.
Right.
So maybe you can give us 2 or 3.
Yeah, I will do that. And everybody out there, I would definitely take a look at Alessandro's site that he started in group. I'm a member of it. And the one salient point I would make about photography, I would say my photography, and it doesn't have to be all these specialized images, but nice pictures of before and after cases has been my best selling tool. And it'll be your best selling tool too if you learn to take some reasonable pictures. So you can do it or train your staff. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. But let me jump into that real fast, okay?
Yeah.
All right. So since, there's so many people that teach about photography, and I used to do it quite a bit a few years ago. So I thought, since you said I had 5 slides, 3 slides, 4 slides, I thought I would show you, since you had Peter Hurley, the simplest portrait technique I came up with that you can all do, because most of you aren't going to have studios. So originally I found this disc years ago from a company called Flash, from F-Stoppers, fstoppers.com. They stopped manufacturing it a few weeks ago because there's so many knockoffs. And the best knockoff that I found is called Kengro 31 centimeter round flash diffuser. So you get 2, 3, 4, whatever, and this goes on the end of a regular speed light or on-camera flash. Now I'm going to show you how to do a quick portrait, and this folds up into a space about this big, and you can put it in a drawer. You can have assistants hold on to these things. You can put it on a desktop, or you can put it on 2 small stands. So this is my typical lighting setup. Diego, Michelle, and I developed this over a few years. Okay, so we'll put 2 on the patient and 1 on the background, 1 light on the background. So our background, if we've got a white background, it turns out to be white. So this is what the setup would look like. So you could do this in an operatory. I did this in my studio just to show you the setup. And this is a really inexpensive, small thing. You can buy aftermarket flashes. I typically buy Yagno. You can buy Newer. You can buy Godox. They're all around 80 or 100 bucks. You buy 3 of these discs. You can put them on stands. And so I'm going to do a little video here. Just taking a test shot there.
We don't see the picture.
Okay, well, you're going to see the picture in a second, okay? So that's the picture that I took.
Great.
With $300 of equipment. Now, it's not what Peter Hurley is going to get. I get it. You guys are going to learn from Peter Hurley, hopefully, if you come to Budapest. Looked like he's going to come to Budapest. By the way, that guy's a fun guy. You'll have some fun. He is just super entertaining, and hopefully you can get him to do a portrait course. But just from that little cheap equipment, okay, to get something like this is the best thing I found that's cheap. Yes, a studio is best, okay? But no, most of us aren't going to do that. And you can take these lip shots. Let me show you how to take the lip shots. So I like this. Many of you know Milos out there. I call him M2 because I like to shorten everything. M2 from Dental Photomaster. He has a nice little reflector that attaches to the front of a lens. So you can bounce light back on the subject. So you get that from him, dentalphotomaster.com. And I usually use 2 lights, 1 directly on the patient and 1 from behind. So it's hard to see, but there's a second light behind. There it is right there. That's sending light behind her. So this is the setup to take this image. No Photoshop. I might have did a little bit in Camera Raw, pumped it up just a little bit, but no change in color. That's just the lipstick she has on. And so all these lip pictures are fun to do, but if you have to do a full studio setup, it's a pain in the tail to do that. So something super simple. You're already taking a portrait. You want to take a nice shot of the patient where maybe you got a little white background, and that's how I do it. So you have 1 light behind her, 1 in front of her, and then the reflector bouncing off of her, just with that super, super cheap equipment. And I got to tell you, 95% of the portraits I'm taking now, this is just what I do, what you see on her, because it comes out so nice. And we all know how hard it is sometimes to get patients to come back and say, hey, could you dress up and make your hair nice and wear some nice clothes and blah, blah, blah. And I want to take, and they don't show up.
Yeah, but what I wanted to point out is, do you see a difference taking pictures of natural teeth, composite, ceramics?
Well, yeah, of course. Okay, most of the ceramics looks the closest to natural teeth. Layered ceramics, feldspathic. Really good composite does too. Zirconia just doesn't, okay? And you can make it look good in 1 light. Alessandro knows the trick, okay? So yeah. if we get 2 lights coming right here, a lot of light here and around here, we can make a single unit of zirconia look great. But when there's only 1 light coming from here, like you're at a bar or restaurant, or 1 light coming from up here, the opacity of it jumps out. So yes, you definitely see a difference, okay?
Okay, so I think this was a great roundup of or an ending of how zirconia works in the dental field. I really thank you very much for taking the time, for being my guest. And I think a lot of people appreciated all your tips and tricks. And I also appreciate that every time I talk to you, you are really sharing knowledge. And I think this is important, and this is what we are looking for. We are not looking for the Cirque du Soleil. You know the Cirque du Soleil.
Well,
And,
yeah, it's pretty.
and before Corona, the dental circuit of lecturing developed into a Cirque du Soleil. So everybody wanted to show that he's better than the others.
Yeah.
And I think the teaching mentality, and you're one of the teachers, you're one of the mentors out there. And this is what I appreciate a lot about people like you, that you want to share knowledge. It's not, I can tell you something if you come to my workshop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So no, be honest. So this time has also taught us that we should share knowledge, that we should help each other to get to a higher level. And that's what I try also now to do with all my activities. I think we can use these online tools. We can use virtual reality tools. We're working a lot on augmented reality, on whatever you can think about. We're working with Unreal Engine. You will see I'm working on a virtual studio. This will blow your mind away.
I can't wait.
Start with that. But all these efforts are made to, at the end, reduce the time we need to get hands-on training.
Right.
So now we spend 4 days, we go to a place for 4 or 5 days. So one day is coffee drinking, and at the end, one day is really hard work. And I would appreciate that you can
one day is too much wine.
Yeah, you can get prepared at home online.
Yeah.
What you were saying, and then I come to your place and I understand. So I don't have to ask the question, what is this material all about? So we can just jump into the work.
Yeah.
It's like if you go to the Nürburgring, to a racetrack with a fresh driving license, it's not fun. So you get prepared. If you're prepared to what you're doing, I think you can perform better, you can learn better. And this is what my ambition is also in these days, to collect information from people like you, and make it available to a larger group, and to benefit from each other. So thank you very much, Ed, for taking the time.
Thank you.
And, I hope to see you soon. So we'll see how the world develops. So
maybe I'll see you in Budapest.
Yeah. We will see each other. We will see each other for sure. So thank you. And let's say Rich has always the best final words. Great presentation as always.
Thanks, Richard.
He's such a kind person, Rich. Thank you very much for your continued.
He actually taught a couple lectures to my graduate students at UCLA eons ago. So we're both old guys.
Yeah, Jose wants to have a drink with us, so I think this is also great. So thanks very much to all of you, and looking forward to meet you in person. And yeah, do you have to say anything from your side, Ed? So
I just thank you for anybody out there that's listening, and it's fun that we get a chance to interact, even not in person. And again, hopefully where the world changes and gets back to a little bit semblance of normalcy, and we can all get together soon. So
yeah, I hope so. Okay, so thank you very much.
All right.
Take care. Bye. And let's keep in touch.